So I want to talk about MVP TS, putting together the minimum viable TypeScript project. And this is, so it's actually really nice that me and James did it in this order because you just saw the Create React app in action. And that's a really good way to get started with React. But if you don't want to use React, like me, I have a lot of personal projects, but now I'm spoiled by TypeScript. So I really want all my personal projects to be in TypeScript. But I don't always do React. Sometimes I'm doing Three.js. I might be trying a framework like Vue out. There are all sorts of different things that you can do other than React on the web. And so I wanted to explore the fastest way to get up and running with TypeScript on the web because there's all of these different build tools now. Webpack is a nightmare of configuration. And then I heard about, well, first I'll talk about my requirements. So I want some non-browser syntax. I want TypeScript. I want SCSS. I want maybe JSX if I am doing React. For my dev environment, I'm very spoiled these days by all these great tools. So I want a dev server that will automatically refresh when I make changes. I want source maps so I can inspect my TypeScript within the browser. I want type checking. You gotta have type checking if you have TypeScript. I want code formatting. I want to be able to write just the ugliest code, and Prettier and TSLint will fix it for me. And then for my production build, I still want people to be able to load it on not just Chrome. So some transpilation would be good, some minification, some tree shaking. Dynamic imports are great, and code splitting. I love web workers, very good for offloading computation and not blocking the UI thread. And Polyfills for all those old browsers out there. I have a lot of demands, I'll admit that. But then I heard about Parcel Bundler. And the whole idea behind Parcel Bundler, it's similar to Webpack or Rollup, but its idea is that it's zero custom configuration. A quick side note, I wouldn't recommend any of this for like enterprise production use. It is not as performant as Webpack, but also you don't have to configure it at all. What it does is it reads third-party config files like tsconfig.json or .babelrc, and it uses those to determine how you're trying to get your project set up. And incredibly, it is magical enough that it does a pretty good job of reading these config files and getting something going for you. It all starts in index.html. So you make this root index file, and as long as you include a script and include a style sheet, and you can throw in a favicon and an image, it will read those from the HTML and use those to determine the entry point within your project directory for where to start bundling stuff. So you don't need like a webpack.config.js or whatever it is. And to define the entry point, me putting the script tag down here has just defined the entry point for Parcel. Spoiler alert, Parcel still requires some configuration. It's not perfect. But first, let's look at what we get for truly zero. We're just going to install Parcel and see what happens. So I threw together an example project with some basic stuff. It's got the index.html file that you need, a favicon because I love having that little bookmark icon in the corner, just an image in case you need some self-hosted images, style.scss, my main TS file, a dynamically loaded TS file, and a worker file. Workers are hard in Webpack, surprisingly hard. You have to use this separate, not well-maintained loader because workers are in their own JavaScript realm, their own execution context. So we would throw it at Parcel and see what happens. And it actually works pretty well. So all we have to do to get running is initialize npm in our directory, install Parcel Bundler, TypeScript, and the Sass engine, and then just run. So this is using npx again, which James introduced a bit. It's a way to run npm packages from the command line without actually installing them globally on your computer. It will just look within your project directory for an installed version, so you can have multiple versions in different projects. If it doesn't find it in your project directory, it will check the global npm or yarn. If it doesn't find it there, it will download from the internet and then cache it. So you can always just run npx package name. It's amazing. It's the new greatest thing. But for dev, if you just run parcel and then point it to your index file, it will start up a dev server for you. It will have source maps going so you can inspect your TypeScript. And for build, if you just throw the word build in the middle of that, it will also do minification, which is great. It does end up supporting dynamic imports with no additional configuration. With dynamic imports, that gives you code splitting. Otherwise, it bundles it all into one JavaScript file, but as soon as you dynamically import something, that turns into its own bundle. The web workers work right out of the box, which made me very happy because I love web workers and Webpack is a pain for web workers. So it's like, it's not too bad. Oh, plus you can throw React in there if you want. All you have to do is install the runtime dependencies and the types, and Parcel will correctly pick up on .tsx files. It will correctly parse JSX syntax, again, with no configuration. It's like, it's pretty good. It's kind of a lot. You could make do, but what are we missing here? So there are some things we don't get with zero configuration. We don't get polyfills. So if you're using set or map or async await, that'll only work in browsers that support that. Oops. You don't get synthetic default imports. If you don't know what those are, I'll dive deeper into those in another slide. We don't get type checking. VS Code gives us per file type checking, but not the whole project. We don't get stricter type checking. I really like the strict compilation flags in TypeScript. We don't get code formatting out of the box. It's not part of the Parcel build chain, even though VS Code can give us per file code formatting. And it doesn't play well with using Jest and TypeScript together for unit tests. So how to add all of these missing features, because I want all of these for every personal project, and I want them now. We just need some more NPM installs, a couple third-party config files, and we're good to go. Polyfill was a pain in the butt to nail down a nice solution, but Parcel 2 will actually come with a built-in polyfill solution. So this slide can soon be deleted. The Parcel 2 Alpha 1 is 80% complete. We're on our way. But for this, I had to install the Babel core myself, and then this weird plugin transform runtime, and the runtime core JS2. I had to, in the Babel RC config file, tell it to use this stuff, and create a browsers list file of what browsers I want to support, and be old enough that it needed to polyfill, async await, and set. And I mean, this is a pretty reasonable list too. Last one version pulls in IE, last one version not dead. And once you pull in IE, you need all sorts of polyfills. Essentially what this stuff gets you is both the core JS library, which has things like set and map, but also this weird Babel generator runtime library, which lets you use generator functions, which lets you use async await. But with all that magic in place, then everything just works, which is great. And soon we won't have to do this at all. Next, I wanted synthetic default imports. These are crucial for VS Code auto-fixing for imports. So without synthetic imports, you get this import star as D3, for example, if you're using the D3 library. And then you can do D3 dot like create an arc. If you were missing this import and you did D3.arc, VS Code would just kind of shrug its shoulders at you. But if you have synthetic default imports, TypeScript will kind of patch over how D3 exports its dependencies and create this fake default for you. So you can just do import D3 from D3. This one, like D3 doesn't actually have a default export. This makes a fake one for you. And so if I was missing this import and I did D3.arc, VS Code would be able to say, hey, do you want me to auto import this D3 default? And so it just fixes it for you. And I don't want to be typing on the keyboard any more than I have to. So all we have to do for this one is create our own tsconfig.json, which Parcel will merge into its own. So it's very small. And we just throw in allow synthetic default imports true. I don't know why they don't do it by default, really. I should probably go open a lot of GitHub issues after this presentation. I have some open questions about how Parcel does their stuff. Next is type checking. So Parcel uses Babel for transpilation, which can crunch TypeScript down into your chosen flavor of ECMAScript, but it doesn't give you any type errors. Babel just strips out all type annotations, and then it's like, oh, okay, it's JavaScript now. And then it can crunch it down an older version of JavaScript if you so desire. So we have to run our own type checking in our own parallel process. So VS Code will give you type checking per file, but if you do something like a find and replace across multiple files and you change something in a file you don't have open, then you won't see that error. So you do want to run the type checking. And side benefit, at work here, we only use Webpack, and Webpack kind of merges in the TypeScript errors along with all the other Webpack output, and it's just random lines. When you run the TypeScript compiler tool on its own, it's pretty attractive. They have like all these nice colors, and it's this cool little screen that refreshes itself. It's very adorable. So all we have to do to run TypeScript on its own is just npx again, the TSC tool, and then tell it to watch for changes, and don't emit anything. Don't actually compile any code. We just care about the type errors. And then we have type checking. But we want stricter type checking, or I want stricter type checking. I don't trust myself, and I want as much enforcement as I can when I'm coding. So again, if we have our own tsconfig.json, we can just throw in strict is true, and that enables all our strict flags. If you're wondering about the strict flags, we have Julian's talk from last time that goes through them all. You can find that on our YouTube channel. And then I also like to throw in these two, which prevents unused values, unused local values or unused function arguments, because again, I don't trust myself. Speaking of not trusting myself, I also want code formatting. Who can live without prettier and tslint, keeping them safe? So for that, we install prettier and tslint via npm as usual and add their config files, so the .prettierrc or extend package.json, and then add tslint.json for tslint. And then similar to type checking, we have to run them on their own. There's no way to integrate this with the Parcel build process. Parcel is really just about the build. It won't do any formatting or type checking for you. These are a little lengthier of commands just because the tools are finicky about what files you pass it. So I'm saying like anything nested within the source directory that ends in TS or TSX or JSON or HTML or SCSS. And then for tslint, pretty similar, but telling it where the config file is, and then just TS and TSX. But for this one, we really can rely on just VS Code to handle it. It's pretty rare that you can cause a formatting issue in another file without having it open in VS Code. You can if you try really hard, but it's rare. So I actually don't really use these scripts. I keep them around just in case. Then just unit tests, because they say good citizens add unit tests. I threw the slide in there so I would look like a good citizen. My personal projects do not have unit tests. I thought I might as well figure out how to do it. So Jest actually almost works out of the box, but it cannot parse the TypeScript files without one additional dependency. So a third party wrote this TS-Jest package that kind of does most of the configuration for you, which is nice. And then you can just run Jest watch for changes, and everything works. So as long as you've added at type/jest, Jest itself, this ts-jest package, and then you have to throw in a jest.config.js file with this just quick couple lines, the ts-jest preset, test environment node, and then everything works. So it's really not that bad. Like all of these little things, they're not that bad. For more advanced Parcel CLI, so I threw out the commands somewhere around here. Yeah, so these two, for dev, it's just parcel index. For the build, it's parcel build index. But I use GitHub Pages because I like free world-class hosting, so sue me. It's so good. Everyone should use GitHub Pages for all of their websites. But for some terrible reason, they require that your public files be in a directory called docs. You can't set a custom name for your public files. It has to be docs. I see some nodding in the crowd. Other people have faced this pain. First world problems. So if you add just a little bit to those parcel commands, you can get it to support custom output directories. So I do, this is for the dev command here, and I throw in an out directory of .dev. Parcel, for some reason, will put both the dev output and the build output into the same folder. It puts them both into dist by default, which is annoying because they're using different rules to build by. So I put them into two different folders. One is .dev, which I throw in a git ignore, and then the other one I put in docs. You also have to throw in this public URL flag, because if you set a custom output directory, it will put that output directory in your import paths. So like if you include a image or a style sheet, it'll throw in like domain.com/my output directory / blah, 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 which we don't want in GitHub. It's treating that docs folder as the root. So this just moves that back up to the root. Parcel also keeps writing the new hash bundle files without deleting the old ones. So you'll just have like 100 of the same bundle, slightly different with a different hash name. So also in these scripts, I just threw in a little remove recursive directory. So it just deletes it before it rebuilds it each time. That doesn't affect the caches. The caches are all separate from that, so things run pretty smoothly. For sanity, npm scripts, I've been throwing out a lot of long, slightly tangly commands, and it is hard to remember all of those. So I do the package.json scripts section. The really nice thing about package.json scripts is that it will use your local npm dependencies. It'll just make those kind of available, so you don't even have to use npx to call things like tsc or jest. So each of these are just like, when I want to run the dev server, that removes the dev folder and then runs parcel into the dev folder and points it to index. When I want to check for types, I just say npm run tsc, and that's tsc plus watch plus don't emit anything. When I want to run my tests that I'm definitely writing all the time, I run this. I've definitely run this before. And that calls Jest with the watch flag. Everyone does this. For production, I just do npm run build. That removes the build directory. It calls parcel with build directory, public URL, index file. For formatting, if somehow you have managed to, maybe you upgraded Prettier and you want to format all your files. That's a reasonable hypothetical scenario. I have this npm run format and just nest all of my individual npm formatter scripts into it. And then for the individual ones, right now I just have Prettier and tslint. I want to add stylelint, but I haven't gone through all the stuff that Nick did for us here at ExtraHop, and so I'll circle back on that one. It'll be really easy to slip it right in there. I added it, but it just had a lot of other defaults, and I had to install some stuff. Already so many dependencies.
It's not zero config.
It's not zero config. This is about zero config. It would just destroyed my narrative. So in all, we needed these config files. I've split them into two columns. On the left is the structural config, where we needed these to really get the structure of the project together. And I consider these red and bad and sad, because that is not zero config if I'm making all these config files. So that was like the Babel stuff and the browsers list stuff for the Polyfills, Jest to get it running with TypeScript, tsconfig for strict type checking, and synthetic default imports. And then the preferential config I'm fine with. The Prettier file and the tslint file, totally, everyone's got their own linter and formatting desires, but no one should use semicolons. But we can talk about that later. So actually, these two are also kind of preferential, because maybe some people want to support more older browsers, maybe some people want to support less. And for tsconfig, that's also where I put in my strict flags, and maybe someone doesn't want the strictest compilation, but that's ridiculous. You should always be strict. in Parcel 2, we get to pull out a lot of those structural files. So it solves all of our polyfill problems. Ooh, I should have left tsconfig in here because I actually don't know if it will solve synthetic default imports. So really, we just need Jest and synthetic default imports over here. These are as they are. Now, these two are purely preferential. I no longer need them for polyfills. So that's nicer. And in conclusion, thumbs up, not too bad. I'm now using Parcel for all my personal projects. I've actually created a repo with all of these settings I just walked through. So if you go to github.com/alexburner/mvp-ts, that is sort of the final version, and that's what I copy paste each time to get started on my personal projects. When Parcel 2 comes out, it'll be even better. And then also, if you're interested in the truly zero config version, I was just kind of putting this together while I was making the slideshow to see what would happen. So that's the same stuff, but Parcel-0 is the repo name. And that's all I got. Questions? Yes?
What's life like without Webpack?
The question, oh, and we're supposed to be repeating the questions. I forgot about this for the video. Ian, sorry. The question was, what is life like without Webpack? And it is so good. For all of my personal projects, I had this Webpack config that I kind of distilled it from what we did here at ExtraHop, and then I've just been like copy pasting it to each project, but it changes a little bit each time, and I never remember which is the most recent version, and it's gone now. I just don't have to worry about it anymore. It's fantastic. That you're synthesizing? Huh. You'll have to take that one up with TypeScript. But the question was, has Parcel ever guessed wrong about what I'm trying to do with my files, and have I had to go back and correct it? And no, not yet. Like web workers out of the box, dynamic imports out of the box, TypeScript, Sass, JSX, it's been surprisingly good so far. And also, I don't think there is a way to correct it. I think you literally cannot configure Parcel. So it either works or it doesn't. Yeah.
How much slower is it than Webpack, and do you think it will catch up?
Ooh, good question. So how much slower is it than Webpack, and will it catch up? I have output from 2018, so asterisk. It's like a year old at this point. Someone should write a new one of these articles. And this is comparing Webpack and Parcel and Rollup, and down towards the bottom. We have this table, and so Parcel, like the first dev build time, 15 seconds, whereas Rollup is half a second, and Webpack is 3.6. Build time average is 8 seconds. Oh, I guess, yeah, build time 2. So after the first one, it's got some cache going. It cuts it in a third, it's 5 seconds. Webpack is 3.3. I'm not sure what they're using to run this test. For my personal projects, it hasn't been that bad. Like it hasn't gotten in my way. I'm still choosing Parcel. But my personal projects are like maybe 10 or 20 files at the most. Yeah.
I just tried to super or something.
The question was, it's interesting how the build time goes down, and does it generate some kind of artifact? And it does. It generates a .cache folder that you'll see in your project directory. And I even have at one point had to nuke that as a debugging step when something was going wrong. So yes, it does have a cache that it generates. Any other questions? All right, well, that was my talk. We've got one more coming up. Thank you. I see you trying to clap. I'll take it.